My husband and I bought tickets for a concert at Madison Square Garden back in February. A few months after purchasing the tickets, we decided to make it a long weekend trip, since we haven't done anything too exciting together for about a year. We were planning on spending Thursday through Sunday and doing all the touristy things since I had never been to NYC. I definitely wanted to see the Statue of Liberty, but everything was so expensive. Luckily, I found a free ferry that would take us right past it. It was perfect. That Friday, we made our way to the ferry terminal. We got hot dogs while waiting aboard, looking out the huge window towards the Statue of Liberty. All was well. We boarded no problems, and got a nice rail spot in the side facing away from the statue, because the other side was so crowded. We weren't too worried because we would be riding the ferry back again, after we had explored Staten Island for a while. As the boat began to dock, the crowd moved towards the exit of the boat, and so did we. It was packed tight, shoulder to shoulder, and we shuffled our way out. Just as we had stepped off the boat, I saw this man out of the corner of my eye with his phone pointed towards me. He was maybe in his late 30s. He was moderately handsome. He looked from the Middle East, like Israel, wearing a US polo ball cap. Now, let me set the scene. We are walking through a guided walkway to the terminal. It's pretty crowded. My husband is walking right next to me on my right side, and this guy is on his right side. No joke, this guy was walking shoulder to shoulder with my husband, and he was looking straight forward, but holding his phone up, filming in my direction, pretending like he wasn't. At first I was like, oh, maybe he's filming all the people leaving the ferry. Maybe like a time lapse or something. Don't be paranoid. But it just kept going on, and it looked like it was directly at me. I got so uncomfortable that I put my hand up to cover my face. I took my husband's hand and asked him to slow down. I asked my husband if he'd noticed this guy, and he did. When we had slowed down, the guy ended up a few steps ahead of us. And I kid you not, this guy held his phone up on his side and continued to film directly at us while pretending to look forward. This is when my husband decided to confront the guy. Mind you, we are walking in a crowd still. He said to him, "Hey, excuse me, but is there a reason why you're filming us?" But the guy just stared at him and then looked away. No response, nothing. Maybe he didn't speak English. We kept walking, and it kept happening. I just held my husband's hand, and held my other hand kind of covering my face. I was so creeped out. Once we were in the terminal, you could either go right and exit to the island, or go straight up some ramps, and we were so freaked out. I was like, babe, we are going this way now. And we walked up these ramps to try to let him drift off of the crowd and exit. The top of the ramps were where the buses were. We didn't plan on getting on a bus. We weren't sure if they were tour guide buses or what. It didn't look like we could technically exit from there. So, we waited a few minutes to make sure that we had lost the guy, and then headed back into the terminal shopping area. It was pretty empty. It looked kind of like a mall, with a gift shop, a little convenience store, an ATM, etc. We stood right in the middle of this almost empty terminal area, while my husband looked up some things to do in Staten Island. And then I saw him again. He walked like 10 feet away from us, still pointing his phone at us. I got ridiculously panicked and was like, "Oh, we have to go, he's here still." At this point, it was painfully obvious that he was filming us. My husband wanted to ignore him and pretend like he's not there, just to see what he does. I tried, but he was literally lurking right there recording us still. I decided to make intense eye contact, like, "I see you, stop doing this eye contact," He then drifts over to the ATM with his phone still up, and while looking at what he was filming on his phone, he pretends to push buttons on the ATM. No card, not even looking at the ATM, just pretending to use it while looking at us and filming. I grabbed my husband's arm and was like, "Okay, we are leaving now." We went back to the massive people waiting to get back on the ferry. There were 3 police officers and 8 canine. We stood behind them, watching the doors the entire time to see if he came back in. If I saw him come back in, I was going to grab one of the police officers, but we didn't see him. The ferry runs every 25 to 30 minutes, so we had to stand there and wait. We were so panicked. A family from England wanted to strike up a conversation with us about their vacation that they were on, but I was so focused on watching this guy that I couldn't invest myself in their conversation. From waiting on for the ferry to the ferry ride itself back to NYC, to 3 hours after we got off that ferry, we were constantly looking over our shoulders to see if the guy was still following us. I have never felt so uneasy in my life. I felt like something horrible was going to happen, and I couldn't shake it. Was I being paranoid? I really don't think so, but I'll never know for sure. Was this someone that wanted to hurt or rob us, or just some weirdo filming people to get a rise? I have no idea. But some man out there has so much footage of me, it makes me sick to my stomach. When I was about 24, I was always busy with work and I lived in a small historic town. So, needless to say, I didn't get out much, which is why I was so excited when my 30-something cousin came up from Fresno to visit. I was also excited when she wanted to go out to check out the scene on the first night that she had stayed with me. As it turns out, she was a drinker, so we headed out to hit up the few small bars in my town. We only ended up finding one bar that was kind of happening. It had a pool table, plus it allowed smoking inside, so we were sold. I decided to sit at the bar and my cousin headed off to play pool with some guys. As I'm sitting at the bar sipping my drink and checking my phone, I get a tap on my shoulder. I turn to see an older gentleman, whom I didn't recognize right away. Seeing my puzzled look, he exclaims, "It's me, Cody's dad." I then instantly realized that he's the father of the boy that I had dated in like the 8th grade, when I was about 14. His dad seemed nice enough, but I did remember that he was a pretty stern character back then. Sometimes, as a punishment for his son, he would have him dig trenches even in the summertime, in the hard-pan rocky ground. I could even remember hanging out at his house back in the day, and just getting a bad feeling about his dad. Though I never experienced anything around his dad that would justify that feeling. So of course, I was surprised that he even recognized me at all those years later. He bought me a drink and we started catching up a little. As we're talking, my cousin comes over to check in with me, upon seeing a much older man at the bar speaking with me. Eventually, he suggested that we go outside to smoke since the bar was getting pretty smoky. Once we were outside though, I realized that we were pretty much alone. This was fine, I figured, since he was always one of my distant neighbors that I had known off and on over the years, but I figured wrong. I began to understand that as he started asking me more personal questions, he started asking me about whether or not I had a boyfriend, or if I would ever consider dating an older guy. I started getting uncomfortable, so I suggested that we go back in where it was a bit warmer. But again, after a few minutes, he wanted to go back outside. At that point though, I was already trying to blow him off politely. My cousin was seeing all of this since she was walking over again to check in with me. She gave me a sort of a warning look before turning and walking back to her game of pool. As the night progressed, he continued to try and get me to go outside with him. This time though, he wanted to go through to his truck. Finally, he grabbed my arm and just tried pulling me outside with him. Thank God for my cousin, he seemed to come out of nowhere, and she grabbed my other arm yelling, "Get off," to him. He immediately backed right off and disappeared into the small crowd, toward the back exit. For the rest of that night, we enjoyed ourselves and had some much-needed fun. It wasn't until about 6 months later that I heard a horrifying story about him from another neighbor. I was told that he was in prison for life. Apparently, he had been stalking and watching his soon-to-be ex-wife at their former home for months. Eventually, he had decided to straight-up kidnap her, tying her up and gagging her. He then put her in his truck or backseat and drove her down towards Mexico. In LA, he decided they should stop for the night, as it was about an 8-hour drive from our hometown. All night on that stay, he repeatedly did awful things to her. He had apparently told her that he was taking her to Mexico to finish her off. He had been treating her that way for years. I knew upon hearing that my bad feeling as a kid was justified. I'm now just getting chills writing this part. Somehow, though, she had managed to escape his brutal attack that night. He was arrested pretty quick after that. So Ken, who tried to get me alone outside the bar that night to do God knows what, I hope you rot in prison. I need help breaking this down, and I need to feel like I'm not crazy. I'm a court clerk and I work for my local courthouse. I work in the clerk of courts, both in the office and in court, split about half-time wise. On Friday, I was in the office at my desk. I'll also assist with customers who come into our office who have questions on certain types of fillings. I am the backup coverage specifically for our records window. In my state, we are considered public records. Anyone can come in and request copies from any case unless it is juvenile, confidential, or sealed by the court. This is really important to the whole story. I was asked to cover the records desk from 4 to 4:30 last Friday, so our records clerk could leave a little early. No problem. I have no issues helping out when I can. Around 4:15, we had a frequent flyer, as we have so dubbed them. This man comes in frequently to get copies out of his case. I should really note the way my office is set up. It is a bit important. We are set up kind of like the DMV. You have to come into the main entrance of security, go down a long hallway and it opens to a lobby. There are elevators straight ahead. The DA's office is to the left and the COC is to the right. You have to open a separate set of doors into our little lobby. There is a counter with windows and it is in L shape. If I can figure out how to attach a drawing, I will. The records window is around the corner, tucked in the back, and there are also 3 public terminals where any member of the public can use to research cases in my county. So, back to the man. We'll call him Joe. Joe has an open family case. He comes in probably once a week to get copies out of his family case, or I don't know what the heck he's doing. It's really none of my business. He came up to my window somewhere around 4:15 to 4:20, said that he requested some documents. When documents are requested from the public terminals, they go to a queue, which I then go into and select them to print. I went into the queue, glanced at the documents and asked, "Did you have 11 pages?" He said yes, so I selected and I printed. I wrote him a little slip out with the number of copies and his total owed. I gave him the slip, directed him to go back to window 4 to 5, that's the cashier's, for payment, and I would meet him up there. I went to grab the copies off the printer, which jammed, messed with that for a minute and counted the pages and took them to the cashier. I then went back to my counter and helped the next person in line. The next customer was easy. Her records were prepaid and printed. After the second customer, it was after 4:25 p.m. My coworker, work wife, we'll call her Lynn, asked me if I wanted to go thrifting for clothes at Plato's Closet after work, and my answer was, heck yes, let's go. Right as we were discussing this, I'm in the view of the records window, but not at it. I saw that Joe had returned to the counter. I went up to the counter and asked how I could help him, and he stated, "You must be new." "I'm not new. I've been at my job for almost 4 years and in the legal field for almost 10. I replied, "Well, no, I'm not, but how can I help you?" He then made a comment about a paperweight that I was using. It was a gift from my niece, a painted rock from a 3-year-old. "Well, that's a fancy paperweight you have there." "Sir, what can I do for you?" "You gave me the wrong case." "No, sir, I printed off what was in the queue." "So you don't need these 4 pages." I tossed the 4 pages and then adjusted a slip. 7 pages in total, and I sent them back to the cashier. At this point, it's 4:30, it's a Friday, and we're closed. I left and headed to Plato's Closet. It took me about 15 minutes to drive over there, and I sat in my car for a few minutes and then went inside. I had beat Lynn there, and I started browsing. She came in a couple of minutes later, stating that she got coffee at a train. So we started shopping and chatting. For some reason, I looked at the door when it opened, and there was Joe. Now I knew it was Joe because he wears that dumb sock monkey hat. I saw him and got Lynn's attention. Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" So I pulled Lynn into an aisle and we ducked down. She's short and I'm tall and I wear heels a lot. I could watch his dumb hat around the store. He immediately looked to the back of the store. He looked like he was rubbernecking the whole store. So he goes to the back, grabs a pair of shoes, and glances at them and continues rubbernecking. I continued to watch him as he moved. We moved opposite. We were legitimately hiding behind clothing racks. He moved around the perimeter of the store, continuing to rubberneck, looking for something or someone. So he leaves and we freak out. We check the parking lot to make sure that he's gone. We try and shake it off and chalk it up to a coincidence. And then I realized that we were talking about it, literally in front of him. And Lynn, she's not quiet. She gets scolded on a weekly basis for her loud, carrying voice. I told the cashiers what had happened, and we ended up leaving like an hour later. The next day I felt so uneasy about it. I called my boss and told her what happened and told her that I was going to call the cops. I called the non-emergency number and left a message with a dispatch. I got a call from an officer a few hours later, and I explained what happened. He said to get Joe's name. At this point, I recognized him, but I didn't know Joe's name offhand. He told me that he would call me back on Wednesday when he was back on duty. I got Joe's name and called the officer back on Monday and left a voicemail. Monday was fine. Tuesday I was out of the office, but Wednesday, Joe came back Wednesday. He came at 4:20 to file documents into his case. He took 20 minutes to file 2 affidavits and a motion. Should have been like a minute. 2 because he needed something notarized. He left and I had a bad feeling. I called the officer and told him what happened, and the officer said that if he comes back Thursday to call, they would come down and talk to him. The PD as he crossed the street from the courthouse. Thursday rolls around, no Joe, until 4:25. He beelined it through the computer in the corner. I messaged my boss. We had already put into place a safety plan. The sheriff's deputies who work security were notified. 3 deputies followed him into my office. I called the PD and 2 officers came down and they questioned him. He admitted to being at Plato's Closet. He was shopping for his 2 young daughters, 9 and 11. They don't fit into clothes at Plato's yet. Plato's has a sister store, Once Upon a Child. Those kids don't really fit there either. So he had a receipt in his car for Once Upon a Child for 5:07 p.m. He denied hearing my conversation with Lynn. Going to Plato's after work, he stated that he left my office at 4:15 and took his children shopping for clothes. He didn't have any kids with him at the courthouse or at Plato's. He also asked the officer immediately and unprompted, "Did she call you?" He also stated that he believed his ex-wife was setting him up. So, because my office is a public office, and he has made arguably legitimate reasons to come into my office, there's nothing that the officers can do. They issued him an oral warning and put him on standby. The kicker is, he could opt into his case electronically, but made a big deal about not being able to opt in a few months ago. We told him that if he's having issues to call the court support line and they would be able to remedy the situation. But instead, he chooses to come in and pay $1.25 a page instead of a one-time $20 fee, which apparently he's also paid that too. If you weren't already freaked out, last year his roommate filed a restraining order against him, followed by his roommate's girlfriend alleging sexual harassment. I won't go into details. Let's just say it's a little bit more than messy. He's also filing extremely high-level types of documents for representing himself. Update. I was in court all day. I'd come down to my desk around 4:05. He came in at about 4:10. I left while he was still at my office. What am I supposed to do? The officers obviously can't do anything else. I need another incident outside of my office to file a restraining order. I've ordered home security. I've signed up for self-defense classes. I'm purchasing mace and looking into handguns. I don't know what else to do.